Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of The People's Report, News for the Left, brought to you by Solidarity TV. Today is February 25th, 2026. Who's starting to think that the Epstein cabal has committed crimes against humanity? How many thousands of times have judges ruled ICE has jailed people illegally? Just how deficient and broken is ICE training? What's going on with the Mexican cartels? Israel is the enemy of Tucker Carlson, but does that make him our friend? In what weird way is ICE deporting Palestinians, and what can they expect when they arrive in Palestine? What new AI surveillance technology might law enforcement deploy in your town? Has Meta's new AI patent guaranteed dead internet theory, but in a more literal sense? In what way is age verification on social media scraping your entire identity? All these topics and more in tonight's episode of The People's Report. Timestamps in the episode description.
Well, don't feel so devastated if you're feeling alienated, because it turns out you're not alone. Just open up your heart, let the revolution start, and grab that megaphone. Solidarity, solidarity, I need you and you need me. Solidarity, 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 solidarity.
Khanna demands action after UN panel says Epstein files point to crimes against humanity. February 18, 2026, via Common Dreams. Representative Ro Khanna on Wednesday demanded action from both the Trump administration and U.S. Congress after the United Nations Human Rights Council said it found evidence of a potential global criminal enterprise in the U.S. government's files related to the investigation of late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. In a video posted on social media, Khanna, a Democrat from California, issued a series of demands in the wake of the UN Council's Tuesday declaration that the actions of Epstein and his associates may reasonably meet the legal threshold of crimes against humanity. First, Khanna said that the United States Department of Justice must assemble a special prosecution committee to build criminal cases against Epstein associates who are alleged to have participated in the trafficking of underage girls. He then demanded that House Speaker Mike Johnson set up a congressional select committee to have hearings where every person who went to Epstein's private island in the Caribbean, where he trafficked girls, is forced to testify. Finally, Khanna said that the DOJ must release the remaining Epstein files that are still under wraps, without any redactions for the names of the predators within. Experts on the UN Human Rights Council said that the evidence contained in the Epstein files is suggestive of the existence of a global criminal enterprise that has shocked the conscience of humanity and raised terrifying implications of the level of impunity for such crimes. The experts added that so grave is the scale, nature, systematic character, and transnational reach of these atrocities against women and girls that a number of them may reasonably meet the legal threshold of crimes against humanity. Khanna and Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky last year authored the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which mandated that the DOJ publish all materials related to the FBI's investigation into Epstein and his associates, with the redactions made only to protect the identities of the victims. Despite this law, the DOJ proceeded to release the files that revealed victims' identities while also blacking out names of alleged abusers. I'll first take a moment to point out once again that the crimes of the Epstein cabal are only possible because of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Without the Soviet Union, or with the Soviet Union still intact, the access that Epstein and his comrades, I guess, had to a huge portion of disenfranchised young women, white women in particular, would not have happened. He simply would not have had access to people who were, particularly white women, who are so destitute and certainly in such numbers that he could have pulled from. But I don't say more importantly than that, but also to that, the Epstein cabal is only capable of committing such horrendous acts of violence against children, both male and female alike. The article takes special note of his female victims, but we know that there are also plenty of male victims as well, although in far fewer number, is only possible because of the extent to which extreme wealth, or really wealth in general, can get you. The extent to which capital can reach is far greater than the extent in which the workers can reach. A person in your neighborhood, in your community, in your city, county, country may very well have the same kind of, I don't want to say desires, but the same inclinations, same criminal inclinations to abusing people, particularly women and children, that Epstein and company had. There's certainly no shortage of violence against women. And while, yes, I do point out that there were a lot of male victims as well, the Epstein cabal was predominantly male perpetrators and predominantly female victims. Obviously, Ghislaine Maxwell was the number 2 in the cabal, and she was a female predator of both boys and girls, and so this wasn't strictly a men on women thing, but in broad strokes it was, and this is because of how permeated misogyny is in our society, in which men, especially rich men, believe that they are entitled to females' bodies and women and girls. And really, I shouldn't even point out rich men. Men in general, poor men alike, feel that they are entitled to women, and that they haven't that women are obligated to give to men sexual satisfaction to whatever extent the man demands it. But it is only through wealth in which this is capable of being undertaken to such a degree, to the point where the UN has considered that it could very well qualify as crimes against humanity. You cannot commit crimes against humanity as a poor worker. I mean, sure, you can be participant in that. We see this in Israel all the time. We saw this in Iraq and Afghanistan by the United States troops. Certainly plenty of Americans have participated in crimes against humanity. But only the rich in America have created the conditions under which the crimes against humanity are committed. The working class, even the most disdainful of us, those who are pedophiles, those who are molesters, those who are rapists, those who even just harbor misogynistic viewpoints, which of course is the precursor to the crimes of Epstein. Had Epstein or his company had progressive or even liberal views towards women, of course liberals are very misogynistic and hate women, particularly women in the global south and women who don't conform to Western neoliberal standards, but even liberal sensibilities towards the equality of men and women, if any of them held those values and those beliefs in earnest, they would not have been participants in these crimes. So, but those who, in our communities, in our working class communities, who harbor misogyny, they are, one foot in the door of Epstein's house already. So we have to make sure that we are combating misogyny everywhere we see it. It is completely incompatible with the values and the thought of the left, and certainly we cannot achieve liberation for the working class if we do not achieve liberation for women, who, of course, as we know, hold up half the sky. Additionally, and of course, more to my main point, wealth and the ability to possess, to control, to dominate, to exploit people in such huge quantities and from such a global pool of people is only capable through wealth. It's only possible through wealth. And of course, that is wealth that is stolen from the public by the capitalists. The capitalists who believe that they are entitled to all that you create rather than only to that which they create, believe that they are also entitled to you, that they are entitled to your community, that they are entitled to you, your partners, your children, your parents, your siblings, your neighbors. They are entitled to everyone. They are entitled to exploit them, to abuse them and to sexually abuse, degrade, humiliate, and destroy them. They also feel that they are entitled to avoiding consequences because, of course, in the capitalist mindset, those on top destroy while those on the bottom suffer. Those on top get to avoid or buy their way out of consequence. They get to have their names redacted in the Epstein files, while people like us get our names revealed to the public. If you're enjoying the show, consider supporting us at solidaritytelevision.org. Courts have ruled 4,400 times that ICE jailed people illegally. It hasn't stopped. February 14, 2026, via Reuters. Hundreds of judges around the country have ruled more than 4,400 times since October that President Donald Trump's administration is detaining immigrants unlawfully, a Reuters review of court records found. The decisions amount to a sweeping legal rebuke of Trump's immigration crackdown, yet the administration has continued jailing people indefinitely, even after courts ruled the policy was illegal. Most of the rulings center on the Trump administration's departure from a nearly 3-decade-old interpretation of federal law that immigrants already living in the United States could be released on bond while they pursue their cases in immigration court. White House spokeswoman Abigail Jackson said the administration is working to lawfully deliver on President Trump's mandate to enforce federal immigration law. Under Trump, the number of people in ICE detention reached about 68,000 this month, up about 75% from when Trump took office last year. With few other legal paths to freedom, immigrant detainees have filed more than 20,200 federal lawsuits demanding their release since Trump took office, a Reuters review of court dockets found, underscoring the sweeping impact of Trump's policy change. In at least 4,421 cases, more than 400 federal judges ruled since the beginning of October. The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is holding people illegally as it carries out its mass deportation campaign, Reuters found. Habeas corpus, Latin for "you shall have the body," emerged in the English courts in the 1300s and is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. It provides a legal recourse for people the government has detained unlawfully. Reuters counted habeas corpus lawsuits by gathering the dockets of every publicly filed federal court case over more than 2 decades from Westlaw, a legal research tool that is a division of Thomson Reuters. The records, combined with other court filings, offer the most comprehensive view to date of the scale of lawsuits moving through the U.S. justice system and of the defeats for the administration. The rush of lawsuits is forcing the U.S. Justice Department offices to divert attorneys who would normally prosecute criminal cases to respond to habeas cases. Using court dockets, Reuters found more than 700 Justice Department attorneys representing the government in immigration cases. 5 of the attorneys each appeared on the dockets of more than 1,000 habeas cases. Partly as a result of that legal logjam, judges have found that the government has left people locked up even after judges ordered their release. Last month in Minnesota, the government had violated 96 orders in 76 cases. The U.S. attorney there, Daniel Rosen, said in a filing 2 days later that the cases had created an enormous burden for government attorneys. Similarly, U.S. District Judge Nusrat Chaudhry wrote this month that ICE violated 2 clear and unambiguous orders by flying a man to New Mexico for detention, while falsely claiming he was in New Jersey and could be brought to a court hearing. A Justice Department spokesperson, Natalie Batalacere, said the administration is complying with court orders and fully enforcing federal immigration law. If rogue judges followed the law in adjudicating cases and respected the government's obligation to properly prepare cases, there wouldn't be an overwhelming habeas caseload or concern over DHS following orders, she said. These habeas corpus lawsuits that immigrants are filing in order to be allowed to be released on bond pending trial, rather than just being rounded up in concentration camps and then ethnically cleansed from the country, cost around $5,000 to file. So one has to kind of wonder whether or not, or to what extent, there is financial interest by legal teams in order to, or by, the so-called Justice Department in general, in order to make these unlawful arrests. When Trump's goons mass arrest people, illegally detain them, often illegally deport them, and of course they can just do so even against court orders. There's no one they're in charge of enforcing their own laws effectively, and they have no desire to stop what they're doing. So that's its own problem on its own, which we'll get to in a second. But there is legitimate financial incentive for them to continue doing this because it will enrich the, I don't want to say the lawyer class, but it can help enrich, legal teams. One woman who had to sue was unable to come up with the money, and it wasn't until her house literally burned down that a lawyer agreed to do it pro bono. Our public defenders are not equipped for this, and getting a good quality lawyer to go toe-to-toe with the federal government costs money. And these people are not only losing so much already from being arrested by ICE, beaten, detained in concentration camps, being deported, losing their families and loved ones. Perhaps, they go and raid a Home Depot, and a gentleman working there is a primary breadwinner for his family, and he gets arrested and thrown into camps. His family files a lawsuit. Not only are they out of that man's income, or woman's income, or other person's income, not only are they out of that person's income, but they are now short $5,000. Most Americans do not have $5,000 laying around to file lawsuits, may or may not be winnable, against the U.S. federal government. Not to mention the additional costs of perhaps potential repeated lawsuits. So this is a huge, devastating blow to communities, not to consider how many people are being illegally detained because they are U.S. citizens, because ICE has racially profiled them, because they have special status that grants them the ability or the legal right to live in the country as immigrants, etc. Or just the fact that people shouldn't be arrested and deported anyway. ICE is, although perhaps surface level a legal organization, they shouldn't be, and we should not be persecuting people for being illegal immigrants. I don't care, and neither should you, about anyone's immigration status. I care about whether they're taken care of in my country, not whether or not they cross the border in the way that the United States federal government has approved them to, or has changed or revoked that approval since they've gotten here. Someone overstays their welcome. Well, they were already approved. It's not that big of a deal. Someone never got approved in the first place. I don't really care. Not my business. So we're already putting immense hardship on these people. A lot of people who are undocumented immigrants are being abused by their workplaces, being underpaid, not receiving government benefits. They don't get health care. They don't get Social Security, although they certainly pay into those programs. And, well, in some states they get health care under special circumstances, which is good. They should be getting these programs or access to these programs. And civil services are supposed to be for all of us. What's next? We're going to deny them access to the bus because they're illegal? I'm sorry if I gave anyone ideas. They're probably going to try that next. But, they're already under immense financial hardship and social hardship and are being oppressed by the United States government, being repressed by the United States government. People are being dragged out of their cars for looking too Hispanic, getting pulled over for having Mexican flag stickers on the back of their car. And now we're going to expect them to shell out a couple $1,000s in order to fight something that is illegal. And they might, even if they win, it might not make a difference because so many of these cases are just going to court, being adjudicated, and then just nothing's being done. People are being ordered to be released from these concentration camps, and they're not. And, the federal government is blaming on, too many people are suing, too many people are getting involved, and our lawyers can't get all these people out when they're adjudicated, which obviously is ridiculous and is a fabrication because they're the ones who put them in the first place. If they didn't want to have to deal with the legal hassle, they shouldn't have arrested them in the first place. The mass deportation plan is nonsense. It is, again, we already discussed, it's criminal in its own nature. More criminal, certainly, than any crime illegal immigrants have collectively committed, allegedly. And so the people in charge of actually administering these legal rulings, are just not doing it, and they really have no motivation to, and certainly no desire to. If you wanted to see justice in America, you wouldn't be part of ICE in the first place. You wouldn't be working for the DHS in any capacity. So, if you wanted justice, you wouldn't be doing this. And so the people who are doing this are all people who have no interest in justice and only have interest in ethnic cleansing. These are the people specially selected by the government through their ad campaigns in order to get the most authoritarian, the most aggressive, the most racist and hateful people involved in ICE, so that way they can and will brutalize minorities, brutalize especially Hispanic people, and inter them in concentration camps without recourse, milk them for all of the money that they have, and then kick them out anyway. Solidarity Television is an independent, grassroots news organization. That means we rely exclusively on viewers like you. Support us at solidaritytelevision.org. ICE officer training is deficient and broken, former agency lawyer tells Congressional Forum. February 23, 2026 via AP News. Ryan Schwank, a former U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement lawyer who is responsible for training new deportation officers, testified during a hearing hosted by Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut and Representative Robert Garcia of California. Blumenthal's office said Schwank resigned from the agency on February 13th. I am here because I am duty-bound to report the legally required training program at the ICE Academy is deficient, defective, and broken, Schwank said. DHS told the public that new cadets receive all the training they need to perform their duties, that no critical material or standards have been cut, he said. This is a lie. ICE made the program shorter, and they removed so many essential parts of what remains is a dangerous husk. Homeland Security strongly denied that it had removed any training requirements or lessened requirements for officers. The department claims it has streamlined training to cut redundancy and incorporate technology advancements without sacrificing basic subject matter content. Blumenthal's office said Schwank was one of two anonymous whistleblowers who came forward earlier to disclose a new ICE policy authorizing deportation officers to forcibly enter an immigrant's home to remove them from the country, even if they didn't have a warrant signed by a judge. His office also released dozens of pages of documents related to the training of new deportation officers, noting the documents demonstrated drastic cuts to how new deportation officers are trained and tested. That includes changes to the number of exams new officers have to pass, the classes they have to take, and the hours they train. The training has been truncated and reduced, both in numbers of courses and in substantive policy, the senator said at the start of the hearing. Schwank disputed that new officers are getting much in the way of on-the-job training, describing the supervision as minimal. Many graduates go to their home offices just long enough to get their gun, their badge, and their body armor, he said. Schwank said he had taught cadets who were as young as 18, including one who celebrated her 19th birthday in his classroom. Previously, new recruits had to be at least 21, but Homeland Security announced last summer that it was removing age restrictions on who could join the agency. At one point during Monday's forum, Schwank was asked whether he had ever seen recruits use disproportionate force during training and replied that he had seen that happen multiple times. He cited examples of trainees accidentally drawing their firearms on each other, arresting people without cause, or using excessive force. Even so, he said, they graduated from the academy. The documents released by Blumenthal's office show that ICE is eliminating over a dozen practical exams that used to be necessary for deportation officers to pass, according to an analysis by Democratic Senate staff. ICE also appears to have cut a number of classes from the training, including use of force simulation training. Deportation officers appear to be getting fewer hours of training overall, according to the documents. I'm about to make the argument that the ICE program is not deficient, and it is not broken. There's a turn of phrase that I believe originates from computer science. That is simply, the purpose of a system is what it does. The purpose of ICE is not whatever the government, whatever the liberals, whatever the conservatives, whatever anyone argues it is intended to be. Much like how the United States is not the American dream. It is what it does. If ICE was supposed to be different from what it is, it would be made that way. The system, and this goes for the general American system, the general American financial system, the general capitalism, the general so-called justice system in America, but in this case we'll be talking specifically about immigration and the DHS. The system is not broken. The system is not dysfunctional. The system has not been corrupted by outside influencers or by the depraved of our society. The system has not been twisted. The system is not broken. It is not worn down. The system works. The system is a well-lubricated machine. The system is well-maintained. The system is, I was going to say runs about as well as your car. I don't know how your car runs. It runs about as well as a maintained car. Yeah, it has its hang-ups now and then, but it works as intended. And this is not to say that the ICE detentions and deportations, law enforcement in this country in general, is largely good with a few bad apples. It's not. It's largely bad. I would say it's entirely bad. Of course, all cops are bastards. And the same goes for ICE, probably twice as much. You don't get involved in ICE. You don't get involved in policing. Well, I can understand that some people get involved in policing because they're ignorant of the situation and want to help, and instead are signing themselves away into a corrupt order. Same with the military. ICE, there is no excuse for. At the very least, the military can pretend that, I'm 18. I've been propagandized my whole life. I didn't know any better. I'll begrudgingly accept it. ICE, no such hang-ups. Everybody knows what ICE is intended to do. And so the gentleman who's involved in ICE training for a number of years, trying to claim that it's deficient and broken all of a sudden because they've been cutting programs, is at best misreading the situation, but really he's a propagandist for a more liberal and comfortable version of ICE and immigration enforcement on behalf of white Americans who feel bad about immigration, but not bad enough to actually want to change it, just bad enough for them to want to ignore it. We saw this under the Obama and Biden administrations, where the liberals in society pretended that immigration wasn't happening, and now are calling for, we have to bring it back to the way Obama had it. Obama was deporting more people, but he was deporting the right ones, and he was doing it clean without terrorizing neighborhoods, without breaking up families, all of which is untrue, except for the fact that he was deporting more people. The ICE, as it stands, might be a little bit, or might be seen as more dark, more corrupt, more evil than it was prior, even to people who were, back then, also opposed to ICE and immigration enforcement. But the reality is that they have just gone, as we say, mask off. The curtains are open, and we can see inside the house. That's the difference. ICE is doing exactly what it's always done, just on a more transparent and more, not even a more aggressive scale, but in a more open scale. They're, harassing white people now instead of only vulnerable communities. They're harassing people in broad daylight. They're being aggressive. Well, they're being publicly aggressive, publicly hostile. They're behaving more like a military than like law enforcement, of which there is increasingly indistinct difference. ICE is, ICE doesn't need better training. It needs to be abolished. And anyone who claims anything less than complete abolition of ICE is either ignorant or a propagandist. Honestly, when the purpose of a system is what it does, there's no functional difference between the ignorant and a propagandist, except that hopefully an ignorant person can be educated. A propagandist is educated and doing so intentionally. So definitely before you or I think about or talk about how ICE training is deficient or ICE training is broken, we should remember first and foremost that ICE is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. ICE is not broken. It's not deficient. These are myths and fabrications created by people who want ICE to continue, but they want to feel comfortable about it, and they want to ignore just how bad ICE has been since its inception in 2002, I believe. So, and yeah, it is bad that ICE training is less thorough than it has been in the past. And yes, this is leading to, I don't want to say worse outcomes, but to more publicly painful outcomes, like the shootings and killings of random people. But remember, the 2 white people that ICE killed in Minneapolis were just 2 amongst, I believe, 9, if not 10 by now, people that ICE has killed so far, that we know of. Openly, directly killed, as opposed to just allowing them to die due to neglect. ICE has been killing people. ICE will continue to kill people. And it's just that white people now are feeling the pain. So, yeah, these rollbacks of, or cuts to education are, like any cuts to education, going to result in more pain for society. But that's not because ICE is broken. It's not because the ICE system, it's not because Trump has corrupted ICE, or that the Trump administration or the MAGA movement in general has caused ICE to be something that it's not. All they have done is drawn open the curtains and allowed us to see ICE for what it always has been, and given ICE permission, encouragement, funding, and purpose to go and be, to the general public, what it always has been for immigrant communities. Brutish Gestapo thugs engaged in a violent, terrorist ethnic cleansing campaign in American streets. Did you know the People's Report is produced for video and audio platforms? Stay informed by subscribing to us on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts. U.S. issues security alert as violence erupts in Mexico after cartel leader killed. February 22, 2026, via The Independent. Violence and unrest has swept across parts of Mexico after the country's military killed a cartel leader that President Donald Trump's administration has labeled the head of a foreign terrorist organization. Jalisco New Generation cartel leader Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, was killed in a military operation in the western state of Jalisco on Sunday, officials said. In the ensuing hours, videos and reports emerged of roadblocks with burning vehicles, shootouts, and gas stations being set ablaze in allegedly retaliatory attacks. The U.S. Department of State Consular Affairs urged Americans in several parts of Mexico to shelter in place due to ongoing security operations and related road blockages and criminal activity, according to the agency. Regions under the advisory include the states of Jalisco, Tamaulipas, Michoacan, Guerrero, and Nuevo León. Videos circulating on social media appeared to show thick plumes of smoke around the coastal city of Puerto Vallarta and panic among travelers rushing through the Guadalajara International Airport. Some footage appeared to show travelers running with their bags in hand, while others videos showed travelers dropping their belongings to take cover behind flight desks among the chaos. Flights to Puerto Vallarta and Guadalajara airports have been diverted or canceled by several major airlines, including Delta, American, and Alaska. Air Canada also temporarily suspended operations at the Puerto Vallarta airport due to what it describes as an ongoing security situation in the city. We're monitoring the situation and in contact with local authorities who are working to resolve the issue, the airline said. Footage from Guadalajara, Jalisco's capital city that is set to host World Cup matches in the summer, also appeared to show burning vehicles blocking roads. Jalisco Governor Pablo Lemos Navarro activated a code red protocol used in emergencies in response to the clashes. He noted on Twitter that public transportation was suspended across Jalisco and urged people to stay in the area to stay home. El Mencho, Mexico's most wanted drug dealer, was the leader of the Jalisco New Generation cartel. The U.S. State Department in December offered a reward of up to $15 million for information leading to his arrest. Trump has said that he would be willing to launch strikes on Mexico to stop the smuggling of illegal drugs over the U.S.-Mexico border. The administration designated the group a foreign terrorist organization last year. Following its formation in 2009, the cartel has become one of Mexico's most violent gangs, according to officials, who have tied the group to the trafficking of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl into the United States. As is often the case, I'd like to remind the audience that, broadly speaking, the cartels are not a Mexican problem, exactly. They're a problem for Mexicans, but they don't necessarily come from Mexico. And the drug trade and the drug problem that we have in America does not come from Mexico either. really the drug trade and the drug epidemic, if you'll call it that, are problems, are American problems that are foisted upon the Mexican people. Now, the cartels service American demand, and they are funded through largely American dollars and supplied through American supply lines, or more broadly speaking, American imperial supply lines. A major contributor to the weapons systems of the cartels is Israel. The United States is a bigger contributor, but Israel is a big sponsor of the Mexican military, and they funnel tons and tons and tons of weapons and surveillance systems into Mexico. Now, the relationship between the Mexican government, the Mexican military, and the Mexican cartels is a complicated one that I'm not an expert on, but I'll give you the very brief rundown. Basically, the cartels exist in order to create and help maintain the demand for drugs in the United States, largely. And this is a profitable enterprise, largely profiting off the suffering of people. As we know, drugs in America, especially things like opioids, opioids in particular are a problem created in large part by the government, or by, I don't want to say like by the government, but by the disregard the government has for the people through, drug pushers and corporate drug pushers paying off doctors, and then of course heroin being imported largely from Afghanistan up until the Taliban ended that after the US withdrawal. And big smugglers, of course, of heroin into the United States was the US military, especially US Special Forces. And all of these problems, all of the drugs are consumed by Americans largely as medicine to cure the pains of poverty. In addition, we know that the crack epidemic was funded by the United States, largely through the CIA, in order to destabilize black communities, which were organizing against government oppression, and in order to drum up untraceable cash that they could then use to fund things like the Contras, far-right paramilitary death squads in Nicaragua, which were in and of themselves drug cartels. Similar situations in Mexico, where the United States allows, in many cases, the funding of these cartels in order to destabilize our southern neighbor. Mexico has a very large population, and were they not in a constant state of low-level civil war, which has claimed thousands and thousands of lives, I want to say 29,000 people have been killed since the Mexican president declared war on the cartels, like back in 2006. I think that was in the article. So, a low-level civil war in Mexico that has weakened Mexico and benefited the U.S. exploitation of Mexican labor, and a continuation of the dirty war in Mexico that saw thousands of left-wing Mexicans murdered by their far-right government, puppeteered by the United States. But these cartels get their arms and their surveillance technology that they use to keep a track of U.S. federal agents, Mexican police and military from Israel, and also from the United States. And here's briefly how it works. The Mexican military doesn't pay their soldiers very well. The U.S., not too many militaries pay their soldiers pretty well, but their soldiers and police officers are, or have been historically, underpaid, in no small part due to the influence of the United States keeping the country impoverished in order to create conditions in which their labor and natural resources can be exploited on behalf of American capitalists. And of course also Mexican capitalists. Mexico is also a settler colony, an illegitimate settler colony from Spain rather than from England like the United States. But we largely don't really discuss that, and we in American society, and perhaps on the left in general, don't largely discuss that, at least in the English-speaking world. I'm going to just mention that and gloss over it real quick. But Mexican capitalists also, in order to keep labor costs down, in order to enrich, capitalists, especially American ones. There's a reason why a bunch of factories, such as I believe Ford in particular, shut down in Detroit, a heavily black American city, and moved to Mexico for cheaper labor that they could then abuse. So they keep the public poor in order to benefit capitalists in America. And as a result of this poverty or just low pay, a decent number of military and police forces defect to the cartels in order to achieve better pay. The most notable one is Los Zetas, which is made up of largely former, or was formed by, more specifically, former Mexican special forces who are trained by the United States at Fort Bragg. If you want a little bit more in-depth information about the relationship that the U.S. military and special forces have with drug smuggling and the drug trade, you can read Seth Harp's book, The Fort Bragg Cartel, and he goes into a lot of detail about this, especially towards the end of the book, about the relationship that the United States has with the creation of Los Zetas cartel. So Los Zetas is Mexican special forces, or was Mexican special forces, who defected, up to 200 of them out of the 500 that had been trained at Fort Bragg. And they use the technology and equipment that they stole from the Mexican military, or that they purchased from American military personnel and Israeli military personnel, in order to wage war on the Mexican public, in order to satisfy U.S. drug demand and to reap massive profits. Now they, like the other capitalists, prey on the powerless in Mexico and destroy them and abuse them for all that they're worth. So they're a product of capital. They are capitalism distilled. People who use immense violence and the monopoly on violence in order to terrorize a population and exploit them for all that they're worth, whether it be for their labor or for their possessions or for their bodies themselves, often trafficking people, especially immigrants trying to cross a border into the United States, into sex trafficking or other forms of slavery and torture and brutalization. Now, the Mexican government has been struggling to put an end to the cartels, not in small part due to the cartels' large resource pool coming from, again, U.S. military and Israel. Israelis have been found to be involved in strategizing for the cartels, especially in Central and South America, like down in Colombia especially. And it wasn't too long ago that former Israeli colonel Colonel Klein, I believe his name was busted for assisting in the cartels there and getting them Israeli weapons and military training. Of course, Israel also helped out other far-right Central and South American governments, especially the Argentines post-Perón, which then, of course, led to the actual largest mass killing of Jewish people post-Holocaust by the Argentine junta. So, and of course, we understand Israel as an extension of the U.S. empire, so all of these actions are, of course, lay at the feet of the White House. And so that's the relationship between the cartels and Mexico. So when we see that the Mexican military has won a victory over the cartels and the retaliation is brutal violence against the public, we have to understand that as coming downstream from U.S. imperialism in Central and South America, and in North America, of course, where Mexico is, as well as the drug trade and trafficking sponsored by the U.S. military, especially through Fort Bragg and U.S. Special Forces, hemorrhaging drugs and cash and weapons from the former occupation of Afghanistan into these cartels in order to generate personal profit in the most distilled form of capitalism. So all of this is run down from and blowback, if you will, from U.S. imperialism at home and abroad. If you like the People's Report, check out our other shows at solidaritytv.org. Tucker Carlson interrogated in Israel has passport seized after interviewing U.S. ambassador. February 19, 2026, via Middle East Eye. U.S. conservative commentator Tucker Carlson said Israeli security officials detained him and members of his team shortly after he interviewed Washington's ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Carlson, an ally of President Donald Trump with whom he has often disagreements on foreign policy, traveled to Israel on Wednesday for a sit-down with Huckabee. Huckabee has stated that Jews have a divine right to colonize Palestinian land and denies Palestinian national identity. The interview followed a public spat between the pair online after Carlson slammed Israel's shocking treatment of Christians and accused Huckabee of failing to ensure protections for Christians who face attacks from Jewish settlers in the occupied West Bank and in Jerusalem. Incidents of harassment targeting Christians, including spitting, physical intimidation, damage to property, including cemeteries, and disruption of services. Huckabee responded publicly last week, writing, "Instead of talking about me, why don't you come talk to me?" Carlson accepted the invitation. Carlson, whose online platform reaches millions, has become one of the most prominent voices on the right, denouncing Israel's grip on U.S. politics, including its lobbying for U.S. involvement in its conflict with Iran and Israel's other regional enemies. Carlson has also condemned Israel's war on Gaza, calling it a genocide. In December, a U.S.-based pro-Israel lobby group named Carlson as its anti-Semite of the year, citing his opposition to Israel's genocide in Gaza. According to reports cited by the Daily Mail, Israeli authorities initially wanted to ban Carlson from entering the country, prompting discussions involving the U.S. State Department. Channel 13 reported that Israel ultimately allowed him in to avoid a diplomatic incident. The U.S. Embassy in Israel defended the process and seemingly backed Tel Aviv's treatment of the conservative figure. An embassy representative said Carlson received the same passport control questions that countless visitors to Israel, including Ambassador Huckabee and other diplomats, receive as part of normal entrance and exit from Israel. It is not accurate that Israel only was going to let Tucker into the country for the interview, the representative said, adding that Tucker received the same positive treatment of any visitor to Israel. Speaking to the Daily Mail, Carlson, a devout Christian, said Israeli officials confiscated passports and took one of his colleagues into a separate room for questioning. Men who identified themselves as airport security took our passports, hauled our executive producer into a side room, and then demanded to know what we spoke to Ambassador Huckabee about, Carlson told the Daily Mail. It was bizarre. We're now out of the country. The episode unfolded amid growing tensions within the Republican Party over Israel's influence on American politics, Washington's funding of the destruction of Gaza, and Tel Aviv's efforts to push Trump into a new war against Iran. Younger conservative voters have been especially critical of Israel's influence on the U.S. and are generally opposed to risking the lives of American troops to advance Israel's strategic interests in the Middle East. Carlson has singled out the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, calling its influence an ongoing humiliation ritual for American lawmakers and the country. Despite the differences over Israel, Carlson remains close to Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance and recently met Trump at the White House. Real briefly, I'll give you the rundown on the plight of Christians in Palestine, well, in the Middle East at large, and a bit about that. And this is where Tucker Carlson's criticism of Mike Huckabee and other Christian nationalists in the United States is or has some basis in reality. Of course, Tucker Carlson, we'll get into this a bit more in a second, is not our friend or ally. So, yeah, Palestinian Christians are, of course, Palestinian. They're Palestinian before anything else. And so the Israelis want to destroy them. Now in America, believe it or not, most Arabs are Christians. I want to say, last I checked, 66% or so of Arab Americans are Christians. Especially after the Nakba and after U.S. imperialism starts really taking a hold in the Middle East, or West Asia, I guess more accurately, the Christian communities found that they were more easily able to move to America because of unified religious goals and whatnot, and a lot of them did. And over time, the Christian nationalism of the United States helped pull or gave room for Christians to move out of the Levant. So I believe Lebanon used to be predominantly Christian. Syria had a very large Christian population. Palestine also had a very large Christian population. And now all of them have relatively small Christian populations, especially Palestine, where the Christians, again, more than Muslims, have found it easier, at the very least culturally, to move to the United States. And thus, the pressures of Israel and U.S. military occupation of the Levant has caused more Christians to move to the United States than stay behind, or has created conditions in which Christians are more free to move to the United States than stay behind. And so, as a result, about 2/3 of all Arabs in America are Christians, and when it comes to Muslims in America, only about 18% are Arab. So just a few fun facts for you there. And I will point out real briefly that, we'll see often, and Christian nationalists will sometimes complain about how terribly Jewish people view Christians. And, Israel and Zionism aside, can you blame them? Let's be real. Christians have not exactly been very good to Jewish people ever, except for maybe the first 200 years. Christianity, the ancient enemy of Christianity. I wouldn't say the people whom Christianity has been opposed to the longest has been Jewish people, not Muslims. And Muslims have never been the enemy of the Jewish religion. It's always been the Christians. The Christians are the ones who ethnically cleansed Jews out of, first out of Palestine. I guess it was the Romans pre-Christianity. But out of Spain for sure during the Inquisition, and then of course throughout out of Russia by the Russian Empire and by interning them in the Pale, and then of course the Holocaust done by Christian forces. We can talk about whether or not these people were so-called true Christians, but all of this was done by people who claim to be Christians. So really, what's the difference? And Christians, Europeans, Christians in particular, have been terrible to Jewish people. From Henry Ford publishing the Protocols of the Elders of Zion in order to disseminate false information about Jewish people in the Western world, to England believing that Enver Pasha of the Sublime Porte was a Jew, so therefore the Balfour Declaration would get him to flip on the Ottoman Empire, and all of these other stuff. Christians have been terrible to Jewish people. So when you hear someone say, the Jews believe X, Y, and Z about Jesus Christ or about Christians, I don't blame them. So, but of course, that is entirely incidental to the persecution of Christians in Palestine, who are persecuted not for being Christian, but for being Palestinian. It is not a religious struggle between Jews and Christians, but a colonial struggle between the colonial Zionists and the indigenous Palestinians, whether they be Christian, Arab, or Jewish, or any other religion that they might have. So Christians are being ethnically cleansed from Palestine. They're being ethnically cleansed, of course, not because they're Christian, but because they're Palestinian. And Christians have been being pulled from Syria and Lebanon. There's a lot to say about the Lebanese Christian communities, which I'm not going to get into now. At times they have been evil Zionist terrorists. So that is the struggle. Palestinian Christians are brutalized by the Israelis on the regular, especially in Jerusalem, but in other places in the West Bank. Of course, in Gaza, the Christian church was bombed. The cross was straight up blown off the top of one of the churches by a tank, an Israeli tank, all of which is meant to intimidate and humiliate and destroy a Palestinian community. The Palestinian Christians and Palestinian Muslims have been unified by national identity for literally thousands of years, and they don't struggle against each other on a religious grounds. Of course, they have their conflicts every now and then, and obviously they don't see eye to eye when it comes to religion because they're two different religions. But Hamas has been very accommodating to Christians in Gaza, and you'll often see the Christian population of Gaza is shrinking. Yeah, because for a couple of reasons. One, the Christians can leave, and two, the people standing up to defend the Palestinians are Muslims, are expressly Muslim communities. So you can kind of see why people might be more inclined to adopt Islam if they see that the Muslims are standing up for them. Just an aside, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP, was a largely Christian organization, not in the sense that the PFLP is Christian religiously, but that the Palestinian Christians, or many of their members, came from the Palestinian Christian community. So they've been there for literally forever. Jesus Christ, arguably the first Christian, is, of course, Palestinian. So they've been there literally since Christianity was invented. So, and Israel is looking to destroy them. Again, because they're Palestinian, not because they're Christian. So, Tucker Carlson has a point. The Christian nationalists in America do not actually care about Christians in the Middle East or in West Asia, because they support Israel. And we will go and we'll bomb Nigeria or anywhere else to defend Christianity. But as we talked about a few episodes ago, we're not going to bomb Israel to defend Christians or Christianity, even though they're being actually ethnically cleansed and brutalized and humiliated, and their communities are actually under assault by the Israelis. The reason why the Christian nationalists support Israel is because Christian nationalists are, of course, nationalists who use Christianity to defend and uphold U.S. empire. Religion is a set dressing. The actual term escapes me at the moment. But superstructure. Religion is a superstructure to cover, conceal, and reinforce empire. So Christian nationalists are nationalists who are Christian, and they use the Christian faith in order to support and drive their imperialism. And so Israel is being key, or maybe not key, but very important to the U.S. empire and the U.S. military domination over West Asia is a big reason why the Christian nationalists support it. The religious argument is the belief that the Bible instructs Christians that those who praise Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed by God. That's not actually, I'm not going to get into theological discussion here, but that's not actually in the Bible, at least certainly not in the way which Christians assume it to mean. So there's this belief that on a religious standpoint, Christians have to support Israel because God told them to. That's not true. They believe it, but it's not true. And the other is, of course, the end times belief. A lot of Christians, especially Christian nationalists, believe that eventually Jesus Christ is going to come down and start a holy war and destroy all the infidels, if you will, and they're all going to be whisked away to heaven and saved. And one of the preconditions for this is the reestablishment of Israel as a nation. So they support Israel because they think that it's a precondition for Christ to return and kill all the Jews. So, and the Muslims and all the other non-believers. Basically, so that way they can destroy their enemies. And they're fully expecting blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white Jesus. See that in nativities all the time. Blonde Mary really drives me nuts. But watch us get to heaven and she actually was blonde. That'd be funny. But I digress. So it's all due to religious belief in well, not all do, but the religious belief in divine punishment coming to the non-believers is a big part of this. So really, inherently, the Christian nationalist ideal is not just pro-empire, but it's also hateful towards non-Christians, especially, of course, ethnic minorities. And so they care more about the idea of the country, the state of Israel existing, than they do about Palestinian Christians, because it's a means to an end for Christ to return and destroy the non-believers. And because they're also racist, they don't care about the Palestinian Christians, and they largely think that they're all Muslims anyway. But also, they're brown people, so who cares, right? So, now that that's out of the way, now that we've discussed that a bit, I would just like to point out something that I've been seeing a lot from left-leaning commentators or left-leaning individuals, which is that Tucker Carlson might be secretly at times our ally. He isn't. Neither is Thomas Massey, neither is any of these other guys who are right-wing nut jobs or otherwise some type of far-right individual who just so happens to also criticize our enemies. Israel is an enemy of the left, but they're an enemy of the left because they are a racist, imperialist, colonial power structure that is inherently, by way of being capitalist, but also in action, far right. These guys have no problems with any of those things. They just have a problem with their relationship to it. They have a problem either with these people being Jewish, like I believe Candace Owens' big gripe, or they believe that Israel has too much influence over U.S. politics because they don't understand the relationship between Israel and the U.S. empire. They don't acknowledge that the U.S. empire exists. They'd rather see the United States be the open colonizer of Palestine rather than be the covert colonizer or the hegemonic power behind the colonization. Or because they are just religious supremacists and believe that Christians, not Jews or Muslims or anybody else, should run the world. Tucker Carlson is not our friend. Tucker Carlson is not our ally. Tucker Carlson is, at best, a broken clock who's right twice a day, but really he's right maybe once a day. And he does have the journalistic chops that can catch us by surprise because we're used to hearing him say dumb, stupid, and terrible things all the time. But that doesn't mean that he is suddenly on our side or that we should be listening to him or we should take him too seriously. And I haven't even gotten into the fact that Israel claims that the detention and interrogation of Tucker Carlson is pretty standard for Israeli tourists. So I guess on top of everything else, don't go there. It doesn't seem like a very fun place to go through. But even though Tucker Carlson is an enemy of Israel, it does not mean he's a friend of us. And yes, it's okay to laugh at the fact that Tucker Carlson got harassed by the IDF. There's actual good people get harassed by them all the time. They're called Palestinians. And they're oppressed by Israel for being Palestinian, for being indigenous to the land, and for, by their existence, denying the legitimacy of the Zionist project. Tucker Carlson gets harassed because he denies the legitimacy of the Zionist project in favor of Christian nationalism. If they were harassing him simply because he's Christian, as many people seem to think that they're harassing Christians, well, honestly, he kind of had it coming. This week's book recommendation is The Jakarta Method by Vincent Bevins. This book details Washington's anti-communist crusade and the mass murder program that shaped our world. ICE uses private jet owned by Trump friend to deport Palestinians to West Bank. February 6, 2026, via The Guardian. Palestinians arrested by Immigration and Customs Enforcement were deported to the West Bank on a private jet owned by an ally of Donald Trump, a Guardian investigation revealed on Thursday. The jet, which flew deportees from Arizona to Tel Aviv, is owned by the Florida property tycoon Gil Deezer, a longtime business partner and donor to Trump, who is also friends with Donald Trump Jr. and a member of the Miami branch of the Friends of the Israeli Defense Forces. Former U.S. officials and immigration lawyers said these flights on the 21st of January and the 1st of February, and Israel's assistance in returning Palestinians to the occupied territory, marked a shift in policy driven by the Trump administration's aggressive mass deportation campaign. Has Deezer's jet been used for deportations before? Yes. According to Human Rights First, it made 4 removal flights to Kenya, Liberia, Guinea, and Eswatini, starting last October. In an email, Deezer told The Guardian he was never privy to the names of those who traveled on his jet when it was privately chartered by Journey, or the purpose of the flight. The only thing I'm notified about is the dates of use, he said. Israeli settlers kill 19-year-old Palestinian American, officials and witnesses say. February 20th, 2026, via The Guardian. Raed Abu Ali, a resident of Mukmas, said a group of settlers came to the village on Wednesday afternoon where they attacked a farmer, prompting clashes after residents intervened. Israeli forces later arrived, and during the violence, armed settlers killed 19-year-old Nasrallah Abu Sayyam and injured several others. Abu Ali said the army shot tear gas, sound grenades, and live ammunition. Israel's military acknowledged using what it called riot dispersal methods after receiving reports of Palestinians throwing rocks, but denied that its forces fired during the clashes. When settlers saw the army, they were encouraged and started shooting live bullets, Abu Ali said. He added that they clubbed those injured with sticks after they had fallen to the ground. The The Palestinian Health Ministry confirmed Abu Sayyam's death from critical wounds sustained on Wednesday afternoon, near the village east of Ramallah. Abu Sayyam's killing is the latest in a surge of violence in the occupied West Bank. Israeli forces and settlers killed 240 Palestinians last year, according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Palestinians killed 17 Israelis over the same period, 6 of whom were soldiers. Mukmas and its surrounding area, most of which lies under the Israeli civil and military administration, have become a hotspot for settler attacks, including arson and assaults, as well as the construction of outposts that Israeli law considers illegal. Palestinians and rights groups say authorities routinely fail to prosecute settlers or hold them accountable for violence. The UN Human Rights Office on Thursday accused Israel of war crimes and said practices that displace Palestinians and alter the demographic composition of the occupied West Bank raise concerns over ethnic cleansing. The Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, citing findings collected in November 2024 to October 2025, said Israel was engaged in concerted and accelerating efforts to consolidate annexation, while maintaining a system to maintain oppression and domination of Palestinians. Residents of Palestinian villages and herding communities have been increasingly displaced as Israeli settlements and outposts expand. Since the start of the Israel-Hamas war, the Israeli rights group B'Tselem says about 45 Palestinian communities have been emptied out completely amid Israeli demolition orders and settler attacks. Additionally, the office said Israeli military operations in the northern West Bank employed means and methods designed for warfare, including lethal airstrikes and forcibly transferring civilians from their homes. It also said Israel forbade residents from returning to their homes in the northern West Bank refugee camps. The operation, which Israel said was aimed against militants, displaced tens of thousands of Palestinians. The report also accused Palestinian security forces of using unnecessary lethal force in the same areas, killing at least 8 people, and noted that the Palestinian Authority had engaged in intimidation, detention, and ill treatment of journalists, human rights defenders, and other individuals deemed critical of its rule. Neither Israel's foreign ministry nor the Palestinian Authority responded to requests for comment. Israel has repeatedly accused the UN Rights Office of anti-Israel bias. It is almost funny, in a way, that the Zionists in the U.S. government are, and of course, specifically this gentleman who's a big fan of Israel and runs like Friends of the IDF, is shuttling Palestinians from America into Palestine. It's funny because the Zionists are trying to do the opposite. They want to get all the Palestinians out by any means necessary. I would like to imagine that maybe most Israeli citizens don't necessarily want to kill the Palestinians. Not that it's much better, but they want to see them out, and the United States is shuffling some of them back in. Kind of amusing in a way. Of course, I would love to see more Palestinians move back to Palestine because they've been forced out by U.S. colonialism, and it'd be nice for them to be able to have the right of return. Of course, they're being shuffled back by Trump because they're trying to do mass deportation, get rid of all of the non-whites in the country, starting with the immigrants and specifically so-called illegal immigrants. And the fact that billionaires are handing over their own private jets in order to do so is strange and certainly appalling. Because, of course, these jets aren't being donated, right? They're being paid for. They're being chartered. So the United States government, and this is one of the things that the article doesn't really cover, the United States government is paying one of Donald Trump's personal friends and an advocate of Israel and the IDF, paying him to deport people from the United States. So he is making money directly off the violence against the minority communities and immigrant communities in the United States. Some of the other places other than Palestine were Eswatini and a few others. Let me pull that up real quick. To Eswatini, Kenya, Liberia, and Guinea starting in October. So, it's not just to Palestine. It's to a couple of other countries. I believe those are all in Africa. And they are making money off this. Donald Trump is paying his friends money to do this. So that should really bother you. Not just in the deportation of immigrants, the violent deportation of immigrants is cruel and unjust, but also that the billionaire president, alleged billionaire president, is giving handouts to his billionaire buddies to use their private jets, which people shouldn't have anyway. It's a climate change conversation, though. Jets that they shouldn't have anyway, they're using to profit off the pain and suffering of people, which of course is how they got the money to pay for those jets in the first place, by robbing the people blind and making all their money on the pain and suffering of the working class. But now they're doing so almost directly. I mean, it's how much more corrupt can you get than this, other than having your friends own the private prisons or privatizing the concentration camps, And the situation that these Palestinians are getting into when they arrive in the West Bank, and they can't go back to Gaza, not just because of the genocide of the Palestinians being so heavily escalated there, but because back in 2004, I want to say, no, I think it was right after Hamas was elected, so 2006, Israel, you can fact check me on that, Israel blew up Gaza's airport, and every time they try to fix it, they blow it up again. So there is no flying into Gaza. They'd have to airdrop all these guys, and I don't think any of these guys have jump training. So they're deporting them into the West Bank, which is an incredibly volatile and violent place to be. If you're Israeli, you're committing the violence. If you're Palestinian, you're suffering it. So they're being dragged out of their homes and by neo-Nazi forces, thrown onto an airplane, deported back to where they were born, where they get dragged out of their homes and deported by neo-Nazi forces. Where are these people supposed to go? We don't let them into the United States, but we also empower the Zionists to excise them from their own homes, from their own land, their own communities, where they've been living for thousands of years. Where are they supposed to go? United States government. And the West Bank, because it's been so much less overt to American or to Western audiences than the situation in Gaza, has been totally overlooked. The violence there is daily. They block off water. The Israelis literally steal their water. They're not allowed to collect rainwater. The Israelis own the rain. They have the military occupation of the West Bank. They control the roadways. They control the checkpoints. They build apartheid walls to keep Palestinians out of Israeli neighborhoods. The military supports the the Hilltop Youth, who are violent, evil settlers in the West Bank who throw people out of their homes, beat them, kill their livestock, gouge sheep's eyes out, torture small animals, and shoot people to death. And the military and the Israeli society recognizes that this is illegal. More than just immoral, it's forbidden by law, but of course they're all protected because they're Israeli and the Palestinians aren't. And, even though the United Nations gives colonized people the right to resist by means of violence, they are denied this right continually by the United States and by Israel, not to mention by the Palestinian Authority, which is the comprador class of the Palestinian government in the West Bank. So the situation there is violent. Many Americans have been killed in the West Bank by Israelis, and the American government doesn't care because they're Palestinian, and that means that they are slated for death by the circumstances of their birth. So the fact that we're deporting people so violently and throwing them into a situation that they had to flee from due to the exact same violence which trained the ICE agents that deported them in the first place is just a cruel cycle of abuse. It should be unthinkable. It should drive you mad. And the fact is that the violence in the West Bank proves the legitimacy of the resistance in Gaza. There's a reason why Palestinian militias in the West Bank fight to defend their communities, like Lion's Den. It's because they, just like in Gaza, are under assault, violent assault, from the U.S. military and, of course, its Israeli component. And they have the right to resist, and the Palestinians are right to resist. Hey comrades, remember the words of Chairman Mao: civilize the mind and make savage the body. In order to outperform ICE, we must first match their physical fitness standards. If it makes sense for you, let's circle back and keep training so we can achieve 32 sit-ups in 1 minute or less. Cops are buying GeoSpy, an AI that geolocates photos in seconds. February 12, 2026, via 404 Media. The Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, MDSO, and the Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, have bought access to GeoSpy, an AI tool that can near instantly geolocate a photo using clues in the image, such as architecture and vegetation, with plans to use it in criminal investigations, according to a cache of internal police emails obtained by 404 Media. The emails provide the first confirmed purchases of GeoSpy's technology by law enforcement agencies. On its website, GeoSpy had previously published details of investigations it said used the technology, but did not name any agencies who bought the tool. The Cybercrimes Bureau is piloting a new analytical tool called GeoSpy. Early testing shows promise for developing investigative leads by identifying geospatial and temporal patterns, an MDSO email reads. The emails show MDSO has access to the global GeoSpy model, which lets it geolocate photos from around the world, and a custom model specifically trained for Miami-Dade County. GeoSpy claims that its custom models provide results to an accuracy of 1 meter, according to the emails. The one-time fee covers data collection, compute resources, research and development, and engineering hours. A June 2025 email from GeoSpy to the agency reads. That fee changes based on the region size and density, according to the email. In all, MDSO's access costs $85,500, according to documents attached to the emails. That includes a custom Miami-Dade County model for $38,000, 2 annual GeoSpy licenses, each costing $5,000 with 350 searches, and an additional 150,000 searches for another $37,500. Presentation included in the email say only other law enforcement agency using GeoSpy is LAPD's Robbery and Homicide Bureau. Made by Greylark Technologies from Boston, the tool is trained on millions of images worldwide, enabling it to recognize distinct geographical markers such as architectural styles, soil characteristics, and their spatial relationships, according to marketing material available online. Because it is a relatively new technology, it's unclear how well exactly GeoSpy performs, though. The MDSO Cybercrimes Bureau is a part of the agency with access to GeoSpy, according to the emails, but the Bureau has offered to perform lookups for other parts of the Sheriff's Office. In one MDSO form attached to an email, law enforcement officials can put in a request for a set of images to be run through the software. That said, the tool is not foolproof and remains a testing and validation phase, the email said, sent by a lieutenant from the Cybercrimes Bureau. GeoSpy outputs should be treated as lead information only and corroborated through standard investigative methods. Use of GeoSpy has not led to any arrests. To date, use of GeoSpy has been limited and largely exploratory. While it has been reviewed in a small number of cases, it has not resulted in any significant investigative breakthroughs or arrests. No case outcomes were driven solely or primarily by information generated by the tool, says MDSO. I think our first reaction to the police in America acquiring such AI investigative devices might be one of, it might be a positive reaction. We know that there have been some very famous cases in which law enforcement has tried to find and rescue victims of child abuse, particularly those that have been trafficked through child sex abuse materials online, where these victims could be almost anywhere in the world, and all that people have of the evidence of their victimization is video and photographs. And being able to use programs to scan these and almost instantaneously come up with areas down to, according to advertising material, within 1 meter of where the photo was taken could be very useful. I mean, I don't know how well they'll do about things indoors, but we've seen before instances in which actual human beings have been able to do that with photographs. and even those taken indoors in featureless rooms. So I can understand people being excited about this, or if not excited, understanding of it. And if we could trust the police departments and law enforcement in America to utilize this to actually help people, then yes, that would be a good thing. I mean, we're still going to open up the issues about all of these AI programs, the data centers, the energy consumption, land consumption, water consumption, the eviction of people from their homes in order to build these. All of these are still problems, but we could maybe see where not all of this AI technology is going to be put to use, or put to poor use. But of course, law enforcement in America does not exist to protect the public. It exists to protect capital. It protects and serves capital at the expense of the public. So yes, while there may be some cases in which this technology could be used in a pro-social manner and might be used in a pro-social manner, we can realistically expect that this is largely going to be used to prosecute political dissidents, and especially people of color who are committing or accused of committing crimes on camera. You have some guy joking around, taking, stupid photos of themselves with a gun that maybe they're not allowed to have, or is just, for pretense, and then the police are going to use it to kick down his door. More realistically, you're going to have people who are creating dissident information or are communicating with political dissidents online, and the police will use that in order to track down political dissidents. It will always be used to oppress the public. More surveillance, more AI surveillance, more surveillance being leased from the public sphere of influence to private corporations that are driven by profit rather than principle, is always going to be a problem and a nightmare for the public. Again, if we could trust the police to actually protect and serve the community, maybe we could then focus this conversation exclusively on the drawbacks of AI. But we have to acknowledge the fact that police will not be using this to protect the people, but will be using it to oppress the people, because they serve capital. They are the guard dogs of capital. It's going to be used to oppress people who are opposed to or cause harm to capital, not people who cause harm to you and I. And of course, like I mentioned before, this is an AI data center problem. These AI data centers, of course, are popping up all over the country and are, stealing land. They are evicting people from their homes in order to build them on top of where people used to live. They have noise pollution problems that are driving people crazy. They are huge consumers of fresh water. They are huge consumers of power and will be directly competing with the citizenry for power, water, and land resources. They are being backed and built by capital, especially finance capital, that is leveraging the public in order to get what they want. They are pushing aside, I wouldn't say democratic systems of order at local communities in order to get what they want, because they know that the public and the municipality cannot fight it. They don't have the means, and the capitalists do. And they're using all of this to run, fund, and power surveillance technology that they are using to oppress the public. Technology that they have used and developed through the oppression of the Palestinians, to use on other people. And of course, to use on the Palestinians themselves. There's a lot of people who make the mistake of viewing the Palestinians as a step towards oppression of themselves, which, while might not be wrong, we have to recognize that Palestinians themselves are oppressed, and that needs to be addressed. It's not wrong because eventually it's going to be used on us. It's wrong because it's being used on them right now. And it does suck that it's going to be used on us, and if that has to be your motivating factor to get involved first, I get it, but it's wrong because it's being used on them at all, regardless of whether or not it's ever going to be used on us. But, like they said, they can't even rely on the AI programs to be right. Or accurate. So they're funneling tons and tons and tons of public money into private corporations that can't deliver a product that they know works, a product that they then have to, verify on the ground, which is good. At the very least, they're recognizing that the AI is not going to be 100% correct, it's not going to be accurate, and they're going to have to verify everything. That at least is good. I'm glad that they're acknowledging that the AI itself is going to be flawed, and that they should be verifying these things. They should be doing that all the time anyway, but not to give them a lot of credit, but credit where credit is due. They are going to verify it with actual human beings, anything that they get. And so far has not led to a single arrest, which, again, I guess we don't really know to what extent this has been field tested and used already. So no arrest, is that a bad thing? Is it a complete failure of the product? Or is it that they haven't been using it wide enough to do so? I don't know. But yeah, it's just more of the police, the LAPD and Miami-Dade using it to, and of course, there's a lot of, this only just crossed my mind, there's a very large immigrant population in both of those communities. A very large Hispanic immigrant population in both of those communities. So, who are they going to be using that AI to target, aside from just the political dissidents? Again, ethnic minorities, and not just ethnic minorities who are committing crimes instead of ethnic majorities who are committing crimes, but they're going to be using it to target, stalk, and harass immigrant communities in order to, find where these people live, in order to identify exactly where they are, and send, ICE or other law enforcement after them. So they're going to be using it to target, the working class, and to oppress the working class, to expand the military police totalitarian state, and to do so at the expense of the public via these AI data centers to enrich billionaires. It'd mean a lot if you join our Patreon at solidaritytelevision.org. Death isn't the end. Meta patented an AI that lets you keep posting from beyond the grave. February 11, 2026, via Business Insider. Meta was granted a patent in late December that outlines how a large language model can simulate a person's social media activity, such as responding to content posted by real people. The language model may be used for simulating the user when the user is absent from the social networking system, for example, when the user takes a long break or if the user is deceased, the patent says. We have no plans to move forward with this example, a spokesperson for Meta told Business Insider. In the patent, Meta lays out why it thinks people might need this. If you're no longer posting online, whether that's because you need a break from social media or you die, your followers' user experience will be affected. In short, they'll miss you. The impact on the users is much more severe and permanent if that user is deceased and can never return to the social networking platform, the document says. To fill that void, Meta would essentially create a digital clone of your social media presence, training a model on user-specific data, including historical platform activity, such as comments, likes, or content, to understand how you would, or rather did, behave. That clone can then respond to other people's content by liking and commenting, or responding to DMs. For influencers or creators who make their livelihoods on Meta's platforms and need to take a break from social media, such a tool could be useful. Meta's patent also references tech that would allow the LLM to simulate video or audio calls with users. Adina Harbinia, a UK-based professor at the University of Birmingham's Law School, has concerns. It does affect not just legal issues, but a lot of very important social, ethical, and deeply philosophical issues as well, Harbinia, who specializes in digital rights and post-mortem privacy, told Business Insider. It's more engagement, more content, more data for the current and future AI, Harbinia said. I can see the business incentive for that. I'm just curious to see how they would, when, and if they will implement this innovation. Joseph Davis, a sociology professor at the University of Virginia, said he was concerned with the impact that tools like a metabot could have on how humans experience grief. One of the tasks of grief is to face actual loss, Davis said. Let the dead be dead, he added. The idea of bringing them back, but you're not really doing that, but in fact it looks like that, that is the confusion. This is just plain weird. Who wants who wants all of their information scraped off social media to the extent in which a person or a corporation can impersonate them convincingly to people online? Who wants that? I mean, who wants to be, who wants a corporation to pretend to be you, to potentially even create audio and video of you? I mean, we already have a problem with AI running scams on people, pretending to be other people, where it's like, oh, hey, it's me, your grandson, I need $30,000, or else I'm going to be, I don't know, detained by ICE or something, I don't know, whatever these scams are. And then you're going to be doing that for social media, and Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp are all owned by Meta. All of that's going to be scraped to create AI versions of people. That's just weird. It's not just, it's like weird, not just, oh, corrupt corporation stuff. Like, who wants this? Again, as the article points out, some people who might benefit from it are so-called content creators who make a living off social media posting. So I guess, yeah, if you want to take a vacation, you can let the AI do it for you. But first of all, if someone is, I guess not everyone's doing like paid social media stuff directly where they get it from like ad revenue or ad campaigns and product sponsorships and whatnot, instead of like people paying for their stuff directly. But if people are paying for it directly, who wants a computer program? But I don't know who pays for influencers in general directly. I don't know. Grow up. I don't know. Get a real hobby. Get into model trains or something. Honestly, that's probably more expensive anyway. But it's just weird. Who wants that? And of course, who wants the AI to mimic you when you're dead? If I'm dead, I don't want to keep posting. I don't want people to see that. Shortly after I graduated high school, a friend of mine was killed in a car crash, and her parents still post on her Facebook page, and I see, and it's really weird. It's really uncomfortable to open a Facebook and see a dead person posting. Who wants that all the time? Not me. And if you're taking a break from social media, why are you letting an AI program run what you want? Where's the defamation, of course, is prone to pop up when the AI decides to post something that you wouldn't say or do that would potentially hurt people. Or, what else? It's just strange. It reminds me of actors and actresses who have their likenesses computerized and digitized, so that way they can artificially create these people after they die. Very famously, Carrie Fisher in Star Wars Rogue One, where she was artificially recreated. And then, who else? The gentleman in Alien Romulus, whose name escapes me at the moment. Who liked that? That was weird. And they didn't look good on screen, and it's really, really weird. The Romulus one didn't look too bad, but that's because of the nature of the story. But it's still strange. I don't like it. I feel like most people don't like it. Do you really want to see your friends or loved ones, or even people you hated, still digitally in existence as an AI clone? Not me. Not unless it can be like holodeck, like Star Trek. You can just flick it off when you're done. I don't want it to be run and owned by a private corporation either. Who wants their likeness owned by a private corporation? And of course, again, we'll reiterate the data centers problem. All of this is going to be powered through exploiting and stealing and competing with the general public for land, power, and water resources. And not to mention the pollution, the heat emission, and the noise problems. Is that worth it? Do you want your town to be, some of your neighbors to be evicted, you to lose power and access to good, plentiful, clean water, so that way I can keep making these videos through AI, so that way Meta could keep publishing these videos that they create of me after I'm dead? No, first of all, don't watch YouTubers who are AI. That's just weird. don't do that in general anyway. But who really wants to make that sacrifice? Who really thinks that trade-off is worth it? Aside from, of course, the investors and the corporations who can profit off it. And the only positive that I could see, and again, like, I can understand why some so-called content creators might be inclined to see that as a positive. Maybe you're a person who has a disability and your primary source of revenue is through online community, and you have to go in for surgery and you're going to be out of commission for a while. I can understand why maybe you would like to have continued income and revenue or something, I guess. But if that's the case, the solution is not AI programs. It is a robust social network that will care for and love and support people in the community who are in need. It's kind of what socialism is all about. And if you can do that at home independently, do it. You should be taking care of your community. We shouldn't just hope that one day society is going to be that way. It will, of course. We're going to win. But in the meantime, we have got to take care of each other. So I can understand why in the very immediate, that could be nice for a select, rare amount of people. Really, who's benefiting from it? Who wants that? Who wants an AI to comment for them on Instagram comments or something? Or who wants AI to post about them on Facebook, or send text via WhatsApp? Like, am I going to download WhatsApp and then let an AI respond to all my friends for me? I don't know. Very strange. I don't like it. The only possible real tangible benefit is if they're doing this patent so no one else can create this technology and then they're just going to sit on it. That would be nice. I don't expect that whatsoever. That's possibly the best outcome, but don't sign away your likeness to AI corporations or to social media. Don't spend your time socializing, engaging in social media with AI programs. And hey, half the internet's already robots. Don't let it be robots of actual people. That sucks, and it's stupid, and I don't know, why couldn't we have a fun sci-fi future instead of the weird, sucky one? Another way you can support us is by following us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Age verification vendor Persona left front-end exposed, researchers say. February 20th, 2026, via malware bytes. Researchers investigating Discord's age verification checks say they discovered an exposed front-end belonging to Persona, the identity verification vendor used by Discord. It revealed a far more expansive surveillance and financial intelligence stack than simply a teen safety tool. A short while ago, we reported that Discord will limit profiles to teen-appropriate mode until you verify your age. That means anyone would want to continue using Discord as before would have to let it scan their face, and the internet was far from happy. To analyze these scans, Discord uses biometric identity verification startup Persona Identities Incorporated, a venture that offers know your customer and anti-money laundering solutions that rely on biometric identity checks to estimate users' age. To demonstrate the privacy implications, researchers took a closer look and found the publicly exposed Persona front-end on U.S. government-authorized server, with 2,456 accessible files. According to researcher Celeste, the exposed code, which has now been removed, sat at a U.S. government-authorized endpoint that appears to have been isolated from its regular work environment. In those files, the researchers found details about the extensive surveillance Persona software performs on its users. Beyond checking their age, the software performs 269 distinct verification checks, runs facial recognition against watch lists and politically exposed persons, screens adverse media across 14 categories, including terrorism and espionage, and assigns risk and similarity scores. Persona collects and then can retain your info up to 3 years, IP addresses, browser and device fingerprints, government ID numbers, phone numbers, names, faces, plus a battery of selfie analytics, like suspicious entity detection, pose repeat detection, and age inconsistency checks. At a time when age verification is very much a hot topic, this is not the kind of news to persuade privacy advocates that age verification is in our best interest. Sending data obtained during age verification checks to data brokers in foreign governments, repeatedly Persona was tested by Discord in the UK, will not install the level of trust needed for users to feel comfortable submitting to this kind of scrutiny. This comes amid broader questions about whether age verification is actually doing what it's supposed to do. Euronews looked at the effect of Australia's world-leading ban on social media for under 16s. Australia's new rules have only been enforced for 6 weeks, but while the country's internet regulator says that it shut down about 4.7 million accounts held by under 16s on platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Reddit, and Threads, children and parents describe a very different reality. Interviews with teenagers, parents, and researchers indicate that many children are still accessing banned apps through simple workarounds. According to The Rage, Discord had stated it will not continue to use Persona for age verification. While the small victory here is that, as the article states, Discord has claimed they will not be using the Persona program in order to age verify its users. That's good. They should not be doing this age verification at all, not just because it's weird and intrusive and also annoying. I don't want to have to verify myself on any social media. I don't think you do either. But, it's just clearly not something that's actually going to help. Kids are not stupid. They're going to be able to circumvent all these things anyway. Very famously, they were using Gmod to do so. I believe I saw a video of a gentleman beating one of these things with a smiley face drawn on his thumb. The kids are always going to be able to work their way around this. The average kid is always going to be smarter than the average adult assumes that they are. And kids are intelligent, and they are creative, and they are crafty. You can't keep a kid out of the cookie jar. I don't think you're going to keep him off Discord. And, I don't think any of us want these private corporations scraping all of our data and being able to sell it or have it leaked, because that's inevitable in both those circumstances. We saw, I want to say last week, we discussed that TikTok scrapes all of your data, and then they sell it on the marketplace, and one of the buyers is the United States government. So all of your data that gets scraped by these companies for age verification, and we know that they're being scraped by the government with 260 some different checks in order to fill out a profile on you, it's just going to be bought and sold. One of the buyers is going to be the United States government. And if that doesn't scare you, think that the British government might get it or have it already. This is how the British government was doing all of their age verifications when they rolled that out the other week, or a few months ago. And, if the British government gets all of my social media and online presence, I'm going to be prohibited from the country if I'm not already, due to my support for Palestine and the Irish Republican Army. So, if you support national liberation movements such as the Irish Republican movement or the Palestinian movement, specifically the Irish Republican Army or Palestine Action UK, you're going to be prohibited from entering, or Hezbollah is another one, a few others, I believe Hamas as well, you're going to be prohibited from entering the United Kingdom due to your support for prescribed terror organizations, which again, you dare to call me a terrorist, I digress. So the British government might already have your data, whatever. The US government is going to be looking to buy it if they can. And the age verification, as we've discussed prior, is simply a way for surveillance. It's not really about verifying the age of users. It's about scraping their data and identifying users for the benefit of corporations and governments. That way they can sell you more ads or monitor your speech. It's not about protecting the kids. It's never been about protecting the kids. It's about scraping the adults. And, you can't even stop kids from getting alcohol. And that's like an actual physical product that you buy in the store, let alone, you can't even stop prisoners from getting alcohol. And they're an entirely controlled environment. You think you're going to stop kids from getting online when you don't want them to? No. And you think the government is not, or the private corporations are not dumb enough to think that that's actually going to work. They just need to get access to all that data. It's just another form of surveillance. And, it does infringe on the rights of children. It's about controlling, again, it's not about controlling the children, but one of the aspects of this is control of children. And I don't know where you draw the line on that. I don't know if that's the government's job, is to draw the line on certain things when it comes to the rights of children. And we can really get into that about how children just straight up are not given the same credit as adults. And to an extent, I think all of us can understand that. Anyone who works with children a lot can kind of understand that maybe there is a serious difference. And and I'll be honest, I don't really like children on social media. I don't want to be talking to some 14-year-old about politics over the internet. I have no idea where they're coming from. I have no idea if it's going to work. More than happy to talk to anyone about it in person. But the internet's already complicated as is. But I don't like talking to a lot of people on the internet in general anyway. But it's an infringement of the rights of children to be treated with dignity. It's, as we know, it leaves vulnerable children more vulnerable because it doesn't give them the opportunity to, coalesce with their peers and find out whether or not their home situations are normal or abusive, or to help find out more things about themselves. If, a child is trying to figure out if they are gay or not, they might not even know that that's an option if they don't have access to social media. Or if they want to be put on, say, puberty blockers to discover whether, their gender identity. If they don't have the means to explore that information or communicate with other people, it's denying them, it may be denying them some sort of self-actualization for the future. So, or, it could help them escape abusive situations, learn more about themselves, their role in the world, connect with other people. The pen pals of the past, helping kids to learn that other kids all around the world are just like them, happens every day online, all the time. You'll see kids exploring the cultures and lifestyles of kids in other countries via like Roblox or whatever. I don't know. It's just an example. So, or just general social media. Roblox, by the way, is one of the companies that uses persona to identify or to manage the age of its users. So if you have a Roblox account, first of all, you're probably too young to be watching this, and I don't know, get a life. But I joke. But no, your data is probably being scraped and sold. Just keep an eye out. Same if you have TikTok. TikTok's one of them too. So, it denies the humanity and dignity of children, denies them access to global information. And 16, I feel, is pretty arbitrary. What should a 16-year-old know that a 15-year-old shouldn't? And I can understand, the difference between 10 and 16, or 8 and 16. And I'm not going to suggest any lines one way or the other, like where, it's 14 the line, it's 13 the line. That's not up to me. That's up to their parents, and hopefully in healthy conversation with them. And, it's the age verification is not about children. It's not about protecting children, because children, first of all, children were getting abused long before the internet. Children get abused in real life all the time. And, whether it be in sweatshops, by their family, by their teachers, priests, or pastors, or by, random strangers on the offhand lock, or by Israelis. Big ones. Palestinian children are under constant abuse by Israelis. So I don't think telling a Palestinian child, oh, sorry, you got to prove that you're 16 before you can play Roblox is, necessarily protecting them from child abuse or whatever. Your average 10-year-old in Gaza has experienced far more than your average 40-year-old in America. But it's not about that. It's all about surveillance, monitoring people, scraping their data, and creating an even bigger and more thorough police state for which they can use to control all of us. If you're enjoying the show, consider supporting us at solidaritytelevision.org. Every week, there's more news than we can reasonably cover. Here's a few more stories you should know about. Armed man shot and killed after entering secure perimeter of Mar-a-Lago, Secret Service says. February 23, 2026, via AP News. An armed man drove into the secure perimeter of Mar-a-Lago, President Donald Trump's resort in Palm Beach, Florida, as another vehicle was exiting before being shot and killed early Sunday morning, according to a spokesman for the U.S. Secret Service. The man, who's in his early 20s and from North Carolina, had a gas can and a shotgun, according to Anthony Guglielmi, the spokesperson. He had been reported missing by his family a few days ago, and investigators believe he headed south and picked up the shotgun along the way. The man killed was identified by investigators as a 21-year-old Austin Tucker Martin, according to a person familiar with the matter. The person spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to publicly discuss details of the investigation. Social Security workers are being told to hand over appointment details to ICE. February 13, 2026, via Wired. Workers at the Social Security Administration have been told to share information about in-person appointments with agents of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Wired has learned. If ICE comes in and asks if someone has an upcoming appointment, we will let them know the date and time, an employee with direct knowledge of the directive says. They spoke on the condition of anonymity for fear of retaliation. U.S. military helping Trump to build massive network of concentration camps, Navy contract reveals. February 2, 2026, via Common Dreams. In the wake of immigration agents' killings of 3 U.S. citizens within a matter of weeks, the Department of Homeland Security is quietly moving forward with a plan to expand its capacity for mass detention by using a military contract to create what Pablo Manriquez, the author of the immigration news site Migrant Insider, calls a nationwide ghost network of concentration camps. On Sunday, Manriquez reported that a massive Navy contract vehicle, once valued at $10 billion, has ballooned into a staggering $55 billion ceiling to expedite President Donald Trump's mass deportation agenda. According to a source familiar with the project, the goal is for the facilities to house as many as 10,000 people each, and are expected to be built in Louisiana, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Utah, and Kansas. If Congress does nothing, DHS will continue to thrive, Manriquez said. With 3 more years pre-funded, plus a U.S. Navy as a benefactor, Secretary Kristi Noem, or any potential successor, has a legal and financial runway to keep the business of creating ICE concentration camps overnight in American communities running long after any news cycle fades. Hey, thanks for joining us for this week's episode of The People's Report. Don't forget to subscribe at solidaritytelevision.org. Organizing the working classes of the world in solidarity forever.